Hey everyone, Mario again, coming at you with another movie review. Today I'm reviewing a movie that I've liked for many years, and because of the date this review was originally uploaded, I decided, might as well give it another review. It, of course, is the 1980s horror classic, which is one of the many films that came out in the wake of the success of John Carpenter's Halloween. It takes the basic formula of Halloween, changes a little thing about the killer, about usually not seeing him, because in Halloween you see the killer throughout the whole movie. It's just bits and pieces. Here you only see hands and stuff, or point of view shots. Here, and of course it adds gore. In the movie, of course, is the Sean Cunningham directed film Friday the 13th. As you can tell, this is the bare bones DVD Paramount released over 10 years ago, still in perfect working condition. Only bonus feature on it is a trailer, and then of course, you know, it's one of those early ones they have to say the sound and all that is bonus features, but not really. Now, this film, the first entry in the Friday the 13th series, and it has a pretty good sized fan base. It has a 6.4 on IMDb, and it has a 64 on Rotten Tomatoes with the audience. I think other entries have higher scores, but for the first entry, especially one that when you compare it to later entries in the series, is not as technically savvy or even acting-wise as savvy, except maybe Betsy Palmer, which I guess is why the critics, because right now it has a
59% on tomatoes with the critics, but no consensus. But when it first came out, critics basically bashed it all to heck. I mean, its most vocal hater was Gene Siskel, who, in his review, called Cunningham one of the most despicable creatures ever to infest the movie business. Which I hear that and I'm like, really? You have that to say? And then, of course, even Leonard Maltin, he called it a bomb, but then he awarded it a half a star more after the second one came out, and he called it a gory cardboard thriller. It's gory, and as thrillers go, it is derivative, but I just hate how these critics, they always try to say that just because of that it's not entertaining. And then again, 80s, so beginning of the slasher craze, even though the groundwork had been laid in the 70s and of course the beginning of the 60s by Psycho, but this is the beginning of it, so I can see probably why. The thing that this is one thing that still kind of puzzles me, is it got 2 Razzie Award nominations, Worst Picture and Worst Supporting Actress for Palmer. I'm like, did they watch Palmer's performance in this movie? That's not Razzie material. It fits the type of genre, and it's good acting for this genre, and it was an excellent performance in my opinion. Now, this film, like I mentioned, was directed by Sean Cunningham, which I have to say, this is the only one of his movies I've ever seen. Before this, he directed The Art of Marriage in 1970, Together in 71, Case of the Full Moon Murders in 73, Manny's Orphans in 78, and 2 years before he did this film, he directed Here Come the Tigers. After this film, he directed A Stranger Is Watching, Spring Break, The New Kids, which I've heard is actually an entertaining film. In '89, the year I was born, he released Deep Star 6, which was the last film he would direct until after the millennium, which was XCU, Extreme Close-Up, which at press time is the last film he's directed, which I can see why. He's mostly doing producing works, so I can understand why he didn't do it anymore. But I have to say, he's actually, just going on this film, he's actually a competent director. Now, the film was written by Victor Miller. Now, I'm going to see real quick what else this guy has written, because off the top of my head, I can't think of anything else. Let's see, filmography. He wrote A Stranger Is Watching, Here Come the Tigers. Okay, that explains why Cunningham did this. He worked with Victor Miller before. The first movie he wrote was The Black Pearl. I think Victor Miller is going to sue Disney. After A Stranger Is Watching, he wrote Getting In, then Jury Duty, Asylum, and the last film he wrote was On the Edge. Let me just check. Is he dead? No, he's still alive. Okay. He wrote episodes of All My Children, Guiding Light, General Hospital, One Life to Live. He was the associate head writer. Okay, he's got some daytime Emmy nominations for his writing, and he won for Best Writing in '85, '88, and '98 for All My Children. And he also got Writers Guild of America nominations, and he won some awards for All My Children. So he's a competent writer, and he did a good job writing the characters. And for the slasher genre, it's actually a pretty interesting screenplay. And how Cunningham interpreted it was very good. One thing I noticed, maybe it's because I actually was watching it more intently this time than I usually do, because usually I just watch it and like multitask, watch the movie, you know, typing on the internet or something. I noticed that, maybe it's just because I haven't watched it in a while too, but I noticed that he uses a lot of parts of the movie. It's just one long shot, so usually one take, or maybe done multiple times and then chosen the best take. But it's very interesting to see that he does that. You don't really see that a lot in movies anymore. Now it's like one take and then it cuts to another take and all that. It's like, I kind of miss the one take things in movies. For some scenes it kind of fits, and for a lot of times it's used in this film it fits. I mean, there are times where it like cuts, but it's usually in a scene that, you know, would require it. Now, acting wise, the film stars Adrienne King as our character Alice, Harry Crosby as Bill, Kevin Bacon as Jack, Jeannine Taylor as Marcy, Laurie Bartram as Brenda, Robbi Morgan as Annie, Betsy Palmer as Mrs. Voorhees, Peter Brower as Steve Christie, Rex Everhart as Enos the truck driver, Walt Gorney in an excellent performance, slightly over the top, as Crazy Old Ralph. You'll never come back again. It's got a death curse. You know, that guy. And then, of course, in a cameo, we got Ari Lehman as Jason. That's about it. Now, the score was done by Harry Manfred. I'm going to have trouble with it. Manfredini. I can't believe I had trouble with that last name. Manfredini. 10 times fast. He's done a lot of film scores, and he's had years of classical training. And his style of music compares to Bernard Herrmann, in which you can kind of tell that in the style. Films he's done, before this he did Here Come the Tigers, and he did the first couple sequels of Friday the 13th. He did from 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. He did up till 6, and then the last one he did, then he did the first two that New Line Cinema did, Jason Goes to Hell and Jason X. Other than that, more recently he did the Anna Nicole Smith story, House 4, Deep Star 6, House 2, The Second Story, The Original House, The Hills Have Eyes Part 2, Cameron's Closet, Wishmaster, and that's just, I think, select filmography. So he's actually a pretty good score guy. The score has always fit the film. The score he did for this film really nails home it, especially the main theme for the movie. And then that piano music over the last part of the film. I believe it was piano. It sounded like it, but you know what I mean. That music over the last scene, it's like it sets the tone of the movie, and then boom! Those of you who've seen the film, you know what I'm talking about. Now, just watching this film again, I can tell you this is a film that didn't really need a sequel or even a franchise to come off of it, because it could have just been a standalone horror film, and if it had been, it probably would have its place in horror history, but it wouldn't be talked about as much as it is in retrospect. But it's actually a good starting off point for a franchise, but you didn't really need it, but from how the second film onward goes, it kind of gets on a life of its own, I guess. Now, in almost 9 minutes in, I haven't even talked about the plot. Now, the plot begins in 1958. We see two camp counselors. They're at Crystal Lake. They sneak away to, you know, fool around. Someone is watching them, so it makes me think of that song, Someone's Watching Me. That'd be an interesting video to do a tribute to this series with. Anyway, they are killed off. Then it skips ahead to the present day, which, even though the film was released in 80, Wikipedia says it takes place in 79, so I guess it's up to you to decide which. We meet a young girl named Annie who's making her way to Camp Crystal Lake because she's under the employ of the original camp owner's son, Steve Christie, and she's going to be the cook. Now, of course, she goes to a diner and asks how far away it is. People look at her, and you can tell from the way that they look at her, they're like, okay, so what the... And you can tell from how they look that they know something. And, of course, it's 20 miles away, so she gets a drive from Enos, the truck driver, about halfway, so 10 miles. And he explains to her that Camp Crystal Lake is jinxed, that a boy drowned there. A year later, 2 counselors are killed. A bunch of fires, and the water was bad one year. So nobody knows who did a lot of it, so they see it as jinxed.
Not as much as Crazy Ralph. They don't talk about it as much as Crazy Ralph does, you know. He's got a death curse, all that. But they know it's bad business, so I guess that's why halfway. And of course she shrugs off the warning, and she eventually keeps going. And of course you can tell something eventually happens to her, which I'm not going to spoil for those of you who haven't seen the movie, but I think you can kind of guess with this type of film. Meanwhile, we have the other counselors. We have Jokester Ned, his best friend Jack, who's Kevin Bacon, Jack's girlfriend Maurice, or Marcy, excuse me, Maurice, I read that wrong. Maurice is a male's name anyway. I guess I just skipped it. Handyman Bill, Harry Crosby, Good Girl Brenda, and Steve's ex-girlfriend Alice. Yeah, it's kind of a nice, we're still working with your ex-girlfriend, so they still are friends. A lot of them arrive at the camp and they begin making repairs to fix up the camp and, you know, enjoying some free time between chores, like hanging at the beach. Now, of course, eventually Steve has to leave to do something, so now the babes, as he calls them later in the film, are left alone in the woods. And one by one, they're stalked and killed, but it's mostly at night when it starts raining, which is an interesting setting. And, of course, I don't really think, with how old this film it is, it's bad for me to spoil who the killer turns out to be. Of course, after Scream, I think everyone probably, even who'd never seen the film, know who it is. It, of course, is Mrs. Voorhees, as my DVD cover does kind of give away. Now, I didn't even know until, I actually thought it was Jason the first couple times I watched the film, but then it's like, oh, it's Mrs. Voorhees. I'm like, oh, child mind, I guess I was stupid. And I love how they make fun of that in Scream. It's Jason! Sorry, that's the wrong answer! Yeah, of course. And Mrs. Voorhees' reasons for killing the kids, it's a little weird, but with how she is, it kind of works, because she's kind of become a schizophrenic and, you know, kind of has like an alternate personality, Jason telling her to kill. Which, if you think about it, it's kind of interesting. It's like the reverse of Psycho. Psycho, it's a son who has killed his mother, who now has an alternate personality who is his mother, who tells him to kill, whereas in this one, it's a mother distraught over the death of her son, who has an alternate personality of her son, telling her to kill. So it's a little weird, but you have to say, if you were to look at Norman Bates and Pamela Voorhees, which I have a question, this is just a question I want to pull. If you were to look at Norman Bates, Anthony Perkins' version, and Betsy Palmer as Mrs. Voorhees, and you were told both of them are psycho killers, but which one would you suspect more? Who would you suspect more? I actually find that question hard to answer myself. Like I mentioned, Anthony Perkins, he's kind of... Oh, I haven't uploaded the review yet, so... Anthony Perkins, he's kind of hard to suspect in Psycho because of how he is. And Betsy Palmer at first is kind of hard to suspect, but as it goes along, you can start to suspect her, so I'd probably say Perkins, personally. Now, of course, as I mentioned before, you don't see who the killer is throughout the whole film. You just see hands or something, so... That's an interesting thing, and they actually carry that over to the sequel, which the sequel is the first time we actually have Jason as the killer, so since it's the first time Jason's the killer, it makes sense that they do the same thing. And then, of course, after that, they go more the traditional Halloween route, where you actually know who the killer is and see him, but since he doesn't have a mask throughout most of the film, they kind of do it at times. You know, like, show his arms or something, or just, like, show him in the distance. Now, how the characters interact, it's believable, you know, like the characters doing the strip monopoly and all their talking. But like most slasher films, the characters seem to be, you know, based on just like one personality trait. Like one of them's just a joker, one's a good girl. Alice is kind of like an artist, but she's like a normal girl. They don't really, you know, have a lot of three-dimension, but I guess it's the performance of the actors that kind of makes up for that, which is kind of why I like films like this a lot, is that even if the characters aren't written well, if the actors can actually come off as likable and have a sort of a charm, it makes up for it. Probably the most well-rounded character in the movie, I have to say, is probably Pamela. Then again, she's not as well, she's only a little bit more, and that's because of the fact you kind of sympathize with her a little bit, because you can understand as a mother or what kind of grief she went through when she lost her son. But then when you find out the whole thing about her being the killer, it's like, ooh, she really went off the deep end. Ooh, it really drove her mad in less than a year or two. And of course, I don't have any kids right now, and I'm not a female, so I probably would be looking at it from a different angle than a female would, but it's like, ew.
I could tell you, I'd probably be mad at the counselors too if it was technically their fault that my kid died, but I wouldn't go off the deep end and kill them. Now, if they had purposely killed Jason, well, that's another story. And it'd be like one of those mob movies. You know, then when someone asks, "Hey, where'd blah 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 go?" Just say it like Marco Foliano says about Nemo in Everybody Loves Raymond. You go away. You know, like that. Now, acting performances, I have to say probably the best one in the movie is once again Betsy Palmer, but that's because she did a good job as Pamela Voorhees, despite the fact that the only reason she appeared in the movie is because she needed money for a car, and she didn't actually think the movie was going to be any good at first, but it just shows how good of an actress she is. Adrienne King as Alice also did a pretty good job, and out of all the characters we see, she's the one that's in the movie the longest out of all the characters, but then again, she's the one survivor. I know that's kind of a spoiler, but I have to talk about it. And other stuff she was in Hair, Saturday Night Fever, the sequel to this, and apparently after that she focused on painting. So I like that they brought in the whole fact that she's an artist in real life into her character. It adds a little bit more believability. And apparently she was in the horror film Silent Night, Bloody Night, The Homecoming, which is a unofficial sequel to Silent Night, Bloody Night. I guess that was her first role since this. So nice to see that she did another film. Kevin Bacon, I don't really know what he's been in.
You know, Footloose, Animal House, A Few Good Men, JFK, Tremors, X-Men First Class, Frost Nixon, Mystic River, Hollow Man, Apollo 13, etc., etc., etc. But I guess this was the fifth film he made, and it was a couple years before Footloose, so you know he had to start somewhere. Doesn't show as much talent as he did in his later films, but he's pretty good in the type of character he has, and of course he's the only character with the on-screen sex scene, so I gotta mention that. And of course he is probably one of the best death sequences in the movie, especially from a technical standpoint, cinematography standpoint, and also from a standpoint. Harry Crosby plays Bill. Interesting job. Take a see what else he's been in. Hollywood Palace. That's not really saying a lot about what he's been in, so I can't talk about it. But he did a good job as the handyman character, especially the snake scene. How do you call a snake? And all that. Jeannine Taylor as Marcy. She also did a good job for what it's written. And I do like her little speech about the dream she had with the rain. It's an interesting speech. Laurie Bartram as Brent. Did I say the last name right? Bartram, excuse me. Bartram as Brenda. She also did an interesting job. If you'd notice, I'm scrolling up and down to see which character is which. Of course, Robbi Morgan as Annie. Her character, Chipper. Have bacon, eggs, you know, Chipper. Very upbeat character. No, it's kind of sad what happens there. And of course, Peter is Steve Christie. He did a good job. He's only in a handful of scenes, but he's an interesting character. You kind of want him to succeed, and then when all this happens, you're like, dang, he lost all that money and then that. Makes you wonder what his parents go through, because I have a feeling they're probably still alive. They just handed off the reins to him. Then Walt Gorney as Crazy Ralph, another performance that's excellent, and probably one of the things that everybody remembers when they see this film. He'll never come back again. And of course, he's no longer with us. He died in March of '04, so see, at least he has a legacy in film. This wasn't the first film he was in. He was in Heavy Traffic. He was in the first King Kong remake. He was in the sequel to this film. Other films he was in, Easy Money, Trading Places, Nothing Lasts Forever, Seize the Day. And he did a voiceover in Friday the 13th, The New Blood, the opening scene, which it's not the same as he used Crazy Ralph, so it's kind of hard to place, but it's an interesting voiceover. A curse on Crystal Lake. A death curse. Jason Voorhees curse. You know, I just love that whole speech. And then, of course, Ari
Lehman as young Jason. Not really much to talk about. All it is just a lunge. Here, he actually got a swell head a little bit over it, which is like him bragging, yeah, I'm the first person to play Jason on screen. Shouldn't be bragging as much. You should say, yeah, that was the first one. You should be saying it's humbly, not like bragging about it. If anyone, the guy who played him in the next film has more right to brag about it that way than you do, because he's actually playing Jason, unlike you, where you're just like, ah, for the ball. He's done other stuff, like mostly stuff I've never heard of, like Deathwood's The Girl, Underground Experiment. You know, probably just like independent stuff. So, and of course, another thing I have to say, the makeup for this film was done by Tom Savini, but I'm double checking my DVD. It's edited on the screen, so yeah, Tom Savini. Which, of course, you couldn't get anyone better to do makeup effects for a slasher movie. I mean, just look at his zombie movie makeup and you'll see. And of course, I think other than this, the only other film in the series he did the makeup for was the fourth film, because that was supposed to be the ending of the series at first, but they lied. And of course, his design for Jason is interesting. How he did the kill scenes is very interesting, especially Kevin Bacon's one. Now, in conclusion, this is an entertaining slasher movie. Not one of the. I wouldn't say it's my favorite entry in this franchise. It's probably be in like the middle somewhere, maybe the middle towards the right, which is where my favorite ones would be. And it's one I can watch anytime without getting bored. But if I were to make like a top 10 list of slashers, this probably wouldn't be in it. Probably one of the sequels would be in it before this, but if I were to do like a top 50 list, this would definitely be in it. Or if I were to do a top 10 list of most influential slashers, this would definitely be in it, along with Halloween, Psycho, definitely My Bloody Valentine, if you get stuff like that. The act, in conclusion, directing by Sean Cunningham, pretty good. Script by Victor Miller, also pretty good for this genre. Excellent score by Manfredini. And the acting, although it's nothing Oscar caliber, for this genre, it fits. And it makes up for the fact that the characters are not 100% well-rounded.